So, as promised, alongside Atonement, I'm going to do some videos on hard times as well. The version I'm using is the Oxford World Classic, so all the page references should match that. And this is looking at comparing it with Atonement for the EdXL exam on childhood. So, before we start looking at chapter by chapter, I think the first thing to be aware of in hard times is the book titles. So the books are Sowing, Reaping and Garnering. I think there's a few reasons why they're really, really important. Firstly, because Gradgrind, I think in particular, is compared to a farmer really who is sowing these seeds in book 1 and then has to reap what becomes of it in book 2, and then has to garner and collect everything back together and make sense of it all in book 3. So there's a nice metaphor there in terms of talking about the structure of the book. Equally, it's biblical. So in the Bible, there's a mention basically that how you sow is how you'll reap. You reap what you sow, basically. In other words, your behaviour will sort of come back to you. And I think it adds a sort of biblical significance. The idea that actually there is a judgment being passed here on the system and on Gradgrind. That Dickens is almost, with this omniscient narrator, being like God and passing judgment on this system that is failing. And although Hard Times is a funny book and a satirical book, there is a very, very serious message that comes in with that religious language. And I think another reason these book titles are important links to that, because sowing happens in spring, reaping happens in summer, and garnering happens in winter when we harvest, when we collect the crops. So the season that's missing is winter, and I think there's almost a warning here that we have spring, summer, autumn, and then winter comes. Actually, that's the hardest, most difficult season. And I think there's a warning here that actually we've had 3 seasons, but the hardest is yet to come. Dickens is writing at a time of upheaval, of revolution, of instability. So Britain is incredibly wealthy, but actually quite destabilised. And with people like Slackbridge, the trade union leader, is warning us of the danger of revolution. The French Revolution had just happened and was still quite fresh in his mind. Dickens wrote Tale of Two Cities, which is all about the French Revolution, so was obviously very interested in that idea. And I think underneath all the satire in Hard Times, there is this idea, this almost biblical warning from him as an author, particularly at the end, that the hardest is yet to come, the hardest times are yet to come, and actually if the system isn't careful, that utilitarianism and industrialisation could end up leading to a revolution that could be every bit as bloody as what we've had in France. The biblical references are carried on with the first 2 chapter titles, The One Thing Needful and Murdering the Innocents, which are both biblical references, and those chapter titles again add this real weighty significance to what Dickens is telling us alongside the humour. Okay, but chapter 1 is largely humorous. It's played for laughs basically, despite all of these biblical warnings. And I think Dickens is making his serious warning about the dangers of ending childhood too soon and not letting people flourish, but doing it through humour and through this omniscient narrator. So it opens with Gradgrind talking about facts, 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 and every time it's mentioned it's got a capital letter, so the narrator's sort of mocking Gradgrind but putting it with a capital letter to show how important it is for him. And we get on the second line, plant nothing else and root out everything else, so that reference to sowing and reaping again is a direct reference to the books and sets Gradgrind very much up as this farmer figure who has sowed the seeds and then has to reap the rewards. But I think there's also that idea of just how unnatural it is, with that reference to natural growth and natural, plants happening and growing in nature. There's that reminder that actually this is incredibly unnatural. We're told about 4 or 5 lines down, this is the principle on which I bring up my own children, and this is the principle on which I bring up these children. So Gradgrind's not a hypocrite. He's not like Bounderby who tells lies. Gradgrind believes in this. And I think part of the tragedy of the book is that he does follow this system with his own children. And as Dickens is showing that it crumbles on a big level and that revolution could happen and that this is a dangerous way for society to go, he shows it through the 2 Gradgrind children. So his depiction of childhood in the Gradgrind family is symbolic of his depiction of the dangers of losing innocence more widely, which could lead to upheaval, which could lead to revolution. It then describes the schoolroom, and we realise that this is an omniscient narrator who sees and knows everything. So the scene was a plain, bare, monotonous vault of a schoolroom. Those list of adjectives really hammering home what's not there. It's plain, it's bare, it's monotonous. It's not what is there. It's not the fact that the facts are in these kids' heads. It's what's missing. The focus is on what's been rooted out rather than what's been put in. And that carries on with the description of Gradgrind's hair. It's as though the hair has been forced out because there's too many facts in there. We've got the cellarage of the two dark caves of his eyes. So again, the focus is on absence. The focus throughout this description is on what's not there, what's missing, what's lost, the innocence that's gone. And then towards the bottom of the paragraph, the description of Gradgrind, the word square keeps coming in. Square coat, square legs, square shoulders. Okay, the idea that he's inflexible. Okay, the word the title Gradgrind is ground everybody down, and he is inflexible. He is this square that will not move and will not shift. I think the other thing about making him like a square figure, there's this idea that he's almost factory made. So Dickens is writing at a time of industrialisation when there's a lot of jobs in factories, a lot of children working in factories for poor money and really bad conditions. And I think Dickens is making this link between the children in this school and the conditions more widely in the industrial system. These kids are almost units on a production line. They are squares on a production line, ready to be passed on from person to person. And I think Dickens is criticising that, the way that the world, again, takes everything away and just leaves them as these functional items who are brought up to have one purpose in life. Here, the children are growing up, not to be people, but to be hands, what the workers are called in Coketown. That's their only function. They're like items on a production line. Gradgrind, as this square man, is following on that system. And that's carried on right at the bottom of the page. They're described as little vessels. So again, they're like items on a production line, arranged in order. So again, they're neatly arranged like squares, ready to be, taught. And it says, ready to have imperial gallons of facts poured into them until they were full to the brim. So after all this focus on what's absent, what we get right at the end is full to the brim. So the only thing that is there is facts. But it is very ironic, isn't it? They're full of facts. But we've actually been told that really they're empty. There's lots of things that are missing, and they're poured into their object, like the hands in Coketown, that having these things done to them. Okay, so although they're full of facts, we know that there's an absence of ownership over their own bodies, over their own lives, an absence of imagination, and an absence of sort of fun and childhood imagination. I think right at the start, Dickens sets it up really clearly before he then goes on to sort of really telling the story of this novel.